The South African government is under pressure on land. More than 2 decades after the end of apartheid, most of it is still owned by the white minority. The Constitution stipulates expropriation. The state buys back the land and then hands it over to the people who were dispossessed under apartheid. But there has to be a willing seller, and so far, there's been few sales. The body charged with overseeing redistribution concedes there are problems.
We acknowledge the frustration that is communicated by our communities around the pace, around our communication with them as claimant communities, and also about the fact that because restitution in itself is a very emotive issue, which is of course an issue of land, people want to see much more robustness in terms of how we're handling the issues.
The question is how to speed reform. Many support radical solutions such as land seizures similar to the policies of Zimbabwe. That's allowed the country's newest political party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, to win seats in parliament.
What the EFF has done was to be politically opportunistic. They came in, they have appropriated this question of radical transformation and the use of the land as a vehicle for that. It was an opportunity that lies there in South African political space where you can actually trump up these issues and be able to gain political support.
The EFF wants the constitution changed so land can be expropriated without the seller's agreement.
We cannot subject the issue of the land to the bills they're talking about. We want to amend the constitution. And to amend the constitution, we need 2/3 majority, and the 6% is there to amend the constitution.
The government says changing the constitution is now an option, but it's wary of forced expropriation given the damage that policy inflicted on Zimbabwe's economy. In the meantime, the ruling party wants more support for those who were dispossessed.
Some of these areas we have not been able to achieve on time. 20 years since the signing of the Constitution, we then have an Expropriation Act which is in line with the Constitution. For those that have been assisted with redistribution and restitution, we must provide, implement and support measures.
The ANC also wants higher taxes for unused land to raise the pressure on owners to sell it to the state. Yolisa, Njamela, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
Right, then obviously this is a fairly complex issue and it's pretty common actually among a lot of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Let's get a deeper perspective on land reform. I'm now joined in our studios by Stephen Bani. He's the chair of the Institute of Surveyors in Kenya. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Land reform, for a lot of our viewers who might be seeing this, they'll be wondering, why is this such a big deal? Why is this such a huge problem? Put this into context for us.
Thank you. First, let me start by saying that land is a very important natural resource because we literally live from land, we feed from land, we develop on land, and when we die, we are buried in land.
It's a very much a part of our identity.
That is it. So land is actually business. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it is important, and given that we inherited land administration from the colonialists, and we inherited even their way of administering land. So now that we are ruling ourselves, we are leading ourselves, we have to customize these laws so that they work for us.
Right. Specifically though, at least in the Kenyan context, isn't one of the main problems to us actually even having a clear path for land reform, even leave the law aside for a moment, is the fact that we haven't really mapped out a lot of our land properly. So we know who owns what is available, what is public land, what is community land, what is privately owned. That data is still pretty fuzzy, isn't it?
That is true. And that's why we have in Kenya now the National Land Commission. And that's one of the mandate of this commission, in that they have to map out land so that we know which is public land, which is private land, and who owns what.
Yeah.
So this is actually one of the main purposes of land reforms, because once we get that, then we'll be home and dry.
Let's talk about what's been happening in Laikipia. Quite a few, of course, obviously, because of the drought, so a lot of the herding communities are now moving around looking for pasture, looking for water. Yes. Quite a few people have been killed in that particular area, including, of course, the dual British Kenyan national as well. Yes. Doesn't that highlight the fact that Kenya is still 50 plus years after independence, we are still yet to clean up our land policy and actually have a clear method of saying this is what is available for use for ranching for this particular reason under these particular terms?
That's very true, my brother. And the issue is that our constitution, our new constitution, recognizes that private rights in land should be respected. And it is the prime mandate of the government to protect private land. And we know now the world is a global village. You cannot do away with investors. We need everyone. But what you are saying is, yes, we know once in a while there's drought in our continent, and we need then to work on our laws so that we have a good working relationship between the people who own more land, like the ranchers, and the nomadic pastoralists.
Here's a part I'm curious about, though.
Yeah.
Where does a balance lie? Because on one hand, yes, I agree, we need to have respect for private property.
That's true.
Fair enough. But at the same time, there's, going back to the original topic, there's a lot of this colonial baggage that we inherited. If you look, for example, at the treaty between Lenana and, for example, the British administrators back in 1904, a land lease period that should have ended in 2004, there's a lot of historical grievances around land. And a lot of the people you're talking about will say, hey, but my father owned that land. That's ancestral land. Why does this rancher have it? So where does a balance lie between these two?
Yes, my brother, you are aware that one of the mandates of the National Land Commission was to look at the issue of historical injustices. They have not properly dealt with this issue. And that's why you see some of these things coming up, because the common mwananchi, the nomadic pastoralist, believes these ranches were part of community land, and that they should use these lands anytime they need. Yet, it's private land. So we are saying, going forward, we need to discuss together, to talk together, and at least get a solution to this, so that we can balance between private land, this community land, and private land.
And of course, being able to use it at times of crisis like the drought right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Because we always say, as brothers, we need to live together harmoniously.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Stephen Bani, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ram.